In this chapter, we will essentially achieve the same thing that we have done in the previous chapter: transfer the goods from Chicago plant to the San Francisco plant. But we are going to do that not using transfer posting, but using a different method called STO. STO stands for stock transport order. The key word to note here is transport, and we'll see why. Now, the business scenario is exactly the same. So, there is a Chicago plant, there is a San Francisco plant. We want to move the goods from Chicago to San Francisco. Now, to move the goods from Chicago to San Francisco, we would need some kind of a transportation means, right? Like a truck. Or we could use an external vendor like FedEx, which can do all the logistics for us. Let's say we use FedEx. Okay? Just for simplicity. The way to do a stock transport order is to create an STO in the receiving plant. The second step is to do a goods issue against the STO that has been created in the receiving plant. So you issue the goods, and step number 3 is goods receipt against the same STO. Just 3 steps. Now, what is the difference between these 3 steps and transfer posting that we have seen earlier? How different are they? Now, there are some preconditions that have to be met in order for us to be able to do a stock transport order this way. From a San Francisco perspective, we have to create Chicago as a vendor. Now, Chicago is supplying the goods to the San Francisco plant. So, Chicago becomes a vendor for San Francisco. If you do it in reverse, take the goods from San Francisco to Chicago, the San Francisco plant becomes a vendor. And that's the first setting that needs to be done. The second setting is to make sure that the material is extended between both the plants. Now, we have already extended the material coffee beans to San Francisco in the previous chapter, so we have got that covered. Now, let's see where you create the vendor as a plant. So go back, go to SPRO, IMG, Material Management, Purchasing, go to Purchase Order, set up Stock Transport Order. Now, there are a lot of settings here. We don't want to look at all the settings here because there is another way to do stock transport order using deliveries, but we are not going to go there. That's a cross-functional area. We require a knowledge of both SD and MM. Since we are just learning MM, we don't want to really go there. So how do you do a stock transport order? Go to ME21N, just like how you create a purchase order. And instead of choosing NB, standard PO, choose EUB. EUB stands for Stock Transport Order. And you see immediately the field vendor is now changed to supplying plant. And over here we say Chicago 1, hit enter. And you say coffee beans, quantity of say 75, And the plant that's asking for 75 pounds of coffee is San Francisco. So enter that there at the line item level. And it says contracts exist. We can hit OK. Doesn't matter. And click save. If you see this message and see no errors there, just click OK and save it. Okay, there you go. The stock transport order 4500 is being created. Now, how different is this from a standard purchase order? Well, not much different, right? We've got a vendor, we entered materials, the price was automatically picked up, and all we had to do was change this field from NB to EUB. This field is called the document type, purchasing document type in this case. So this is part of configuration. We have not seen purchasing document type configuration yet. So we don't want to go too much into the details, but for now, just understand that this transaction, the blueprint for this transaction, when I mean blueprint in terms of how this document behaves, this purchasing order behaves or stock transport order behaves, is based primarily on this little drop down here. And we have changed the blueprint of this transaction ME21N from a purchase order to a stock transport order by changing the document type. And like I said, we don't understand the configuration behind the document type just yet. Don't worry about it. NB is standard PO and EUB is stock transport order. In case you don't see these codes, NB and EUB, the way to enable them is by going to settings, options, and click on interactive design, visualization, and ensure that these two checkboxes are checked on. Show keys with drop downs, sort keys with drop down lists. Once you have them enabled, just go back and come again and you should see these keys enabled, the EUB and NB. If not, you'll just see the description, stock transport order and standard PO. And sometimes it can be confusing. You see, the description for all these keys is the same. This is EC and this is ECDP, but the description is the same, electronic commerce. So in cases like that, it becomes difficult to select the right key from the drop down. In our case, we have chosen EUB for stock transport order, which has changed the blueprint of how we do this purchasing order. Now, if you go back and enter that purchase order number in there, it's not really much different. The vendor has changed from 4001 to supplying plant. Now, it's not the vendor who is delivering the goods, it's the supplying plant. It's a plant. It's one of our plants. And the way we have done it previously is using transfer posting. And what does the transfer posting have? It has the material, it has the movement type, it has the source plant, it has the target plant, and quantities. Well, we have all of that here, right? We have the material, we have the source plant, we have the target plant, which is San Francisco. It's just that the description is different, but it's San Francisco. And we have quantity, right? We have everything. What else is there? Well, we have a delivery schedule. This is one of the advantages of using a stock transport order. Using transfer posting, either one step or two step, we don't have a schedule of delivery. And we'll see what a schedule of delivery is when we start to compare a transfer posting with stock transport order. And we also have deliveries, we have texts, we have delivery addresses, confirmation. There's so much more functionality in a stock transport order when doing stock transfer versus doing it using transfer posting. Before we compare this, let's just finish this stock transport order. So step number 1 is done. Now let's do step number 2, which is issuing a goods against the stock transport order in the supplying plant. How do you do that? This is simple, using MyGo. So what do you want to do? You want to do a goods issue, okay, against a purchase order, and the purchase order number is this. I just pasted it from my clipboard and hit enter. All right, the movement type is automatically determined. It's 351 from stock in transit, from plant to stock in transit. And the storage location from which we want to pick up the goods is coffee. And what's the quantity? 75. We're good with that. Click item OK and hit save. All right, the material document is posted. Now let's go check the stock. So the stock over here in Chicago, coffee storage location, should go down by 75. Just like how we have done in transfer posting. Let's go refresh this. Did it go down? From 700, it went down by 75 pounds and came down to 625. But the San Francisco plant stock did not go up just yet. So we have done this goods issue, which removed stock from the storage location using movement type 351. And of course, it's a minus because it's removing the stock. And where is the stock now? The 75 pounds? Is it there in the stock transfer? No. Where is it? You see, it's an on order stock. So the way to check for in transit stock when you do it via stock transport order is not by going and checking it in MMBE. You cannot see the stock in transit in MMBE when you do this whole process of stock transfer via stock transport order. MMBE shows it as on order stock. So that means the San Francisco has ordered for 75. Purchase order, like a purchase order. Not from a vendor, but from another plant, the Chicago plant. There is another transaction that you can use to purely look at the stock in transit from the perspective of stock transport order. So if you go to MB5T and select the material, and the receiving plant is San Francisco, right? And click execute. You should see the 75 right there. And the supplying plant is Chicago one. So why is this different from transfer posting? It's the way the accounting is done. So behind the scenes, transfer posting is more of a inventory management based solution to transferring stock. But stock transport order can involve logistics as well. It can involve accounting as well. It's much more involved. All right, so before we go talk about the differences, let's complete this transaction. Using 351, we have removed the stock from Chicago into transit of San Francisco. Now, we want to receive the goods into the San Francisco plant based on that stock transport order. That's step number 3. So, select goods receipt against a PO. All right. Hit enter. And it automatically determines the material quantity, where it's going to go, the movement type, etc., etc. And the storage location, of course, is coffee. Click item OK and save. Now the stock in transit should be gone. It's no longer stock in transit. See, you don't see anything there. And it should magically appear in the San Francisco plant. Do you see that? 150 plus 75 is 225. All right, so we have used 101 plus as the movement type to receive goods from that stock transport order. Now I'm sure you must be wondering why do we have to do it one way versus the other?